Usually when we think about a peaceful life, we picture something inherently restful. We imagine a hammock on a quiet afternoon.
Right.
You finish all your chores, you pay your bills, and you just sit back and you just let out this long exhale.
Yeah, that deep breath.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We equate success and especially spiritual success with reaching this state of total undisturbed relaxation.
No friction at all.
Right.
Yeah.
No effort. Just drifting down a lazy river.
Well, it's the arrival fallacy, really.
Arrival fallacy.
Yeah, it's this persistent idea that if you just reach a certain spiritual plateau, all the struggle just ends.
Like you finally leveled up and beat the game.
Exactly. We want the life hack that, eliminates all the work. But when you step into the world of historical Christian spirituality,
Oh boy.
specifically the 17th century Puritan landscape, that hammock is just aggressively flipped upside down.
Yeah, you're not relaxing anymore.
Not at all. That lazy river is actually a rushing torrent, and, well, you are expected to row against the current with literally everything you've got.
So let's ground this immediately in a historical moment that proves just how disruptive this idea really is.
It's such a good story.
It is. So picture an 18th century Scottish military man, Colonel James Gardner. By all accounts, he's, a man of the world.
Very much so.
He's known in his social circles as the Happy Rake, which is just a great nickname.
Right, he was completely consumed by the social scene.
Yeah, the social scene, his military career, all his earthly pursuits. I mean, religion is the absolute furthest thing from his mind.
He is the quintessential picture of someone polishing the outside of the cup while totally ignoring the inside.
Just living for the immediate thrill.
Exactly.
So one day, Gardner's going through his luggage, his portmanteau, and he finds this book.
Someone snuck it in there, right?
Yeah. Either his mother or his aunt had secretly slipped it into his bag. And the book is Thomas Watson's 17th century Puritan classic, Heaven Taken by Storm.
Which also goes by the subtitle, The Christian Soldier.
Right, The Christian Soldier. And Gardner is a military man. He sees that title and thinks it's going to be like a comedy routine.
He totally thinks it's a joke.
He assumes it's going to be some clumsy attempt by a sheltered clergyman to speak the gritty language of the barracks. So he opens it purely for his own amusement.
Right, expecting to just mock the metaphors. He expects a caricature.
Yeah.
He assumes the text will be soft, out of touch, and easily dismissed by someone who has, seen actual combat.
But he doesn't laugh. As he starts reading, the words literally leap off the page.
It catches him completely off guard.
Completely. The profound reality of Watson's argument grips him so intensely that an impression is made on his mind that radically and permanently changes the trajectory of his entire life.
Wow.
He goes from this careless man of the world to a deeply committed, passionate Christian. I mean, the book he meant to mock ends up completely dismantling him.
Well, the text cuts through his defenses because Gardner thought he was evaluating the book, but...
The book ended up evaluating it.
Exactly. Watson has this unnerving ability to just strip away our excuses and expose the reality of our spiritual condition.
It's intense. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way.
Glad to be here.
So Watson builds this entire masterful argument on a single, highly provocative verse of Scripture, right?
He does. It's Matthew chapter 11, verse 12.
Okay, let's hear it.
It says, "The kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force."
The violent take it by force. I mean, you do not usually see heaven and violence in the same sentence.
Especially not in a positive light.
Right. It sounds like an oxymoron.
It is absolutely meant to be jarring. The Greek word used there for violence is biastai.
Diaste. Okay.
And Watson is very careful to define what he means by this holy violence because he explicitly states what it is not.
Which is important.
Very. It is not physical aggression. It is not taking up arms in the name of religion, which, was a very real issue in 17th century England.
Right. They had literally just been through the English Civil War.
Exactly. And it's also not an ignorant, angry zeal where you are just loud and obnoxious about your beliefs without actually understanding them.
He even specifies that people shouldn't be physically violent towards themselves.
Yeah, right.
Like reminding the reader that the body is a temple.
Yeah, he's actively warning against extreme physical asceticism or self-harm.
So if it's not physical, what is it?
The violence he is talking about is an intense, energetic, spiritual determination. It's a passionate pursuit of God.
Okay, so it's internal.
Right. It implies a resolution of the will, a vigor of the affections, and the absolute strength of your endeavor.
That sounds exhausting.
It means engaging all the powers of your soul to pursue the kingdom of God as if it were a matter of life and death. Because, well, in Watson's theological framework, it literally is life and death.
Okay, I need to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because it triggers an immediate psychological red flag for me. Anyone familiar with basic Christian theology knows the foundational concept is grace.
Right. Absolutely.
Salvation is a free gift. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. So if Christianity teaches that salvation is a free gift of grace, why is Thomas Watson telling us we have to fight and sweat and use violence to get into heaven?
It sounds contradictory.
It sounds dangerously close to a works righteousness treadmill. It sounds like a recipe for massive spiritual burnout.
And that tension right there is exactly where modern readers often misinterpret the Puritan mindset.
Okay, so untangle that for us.
Well, Watson is fully reformed in his theology. He believes unequivocally in sola gratia, grace alone.
Right.
He explicitly states that it is not our sweat that saves us, but Christ's blood. Heaven is a gift, but genuine grace produces the striving. The effort, the holy violence, is not the currency used to purchase salvation.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Not the currency.
Right. It is the necessary, inevitable response of a heart that has been awakened by grace.
I hear the theological distinction, but practically speaking, how does a person differentiate between striving because I'm saved and striving to earn my salvation?
It's a fine line for a lot of people.
Because if the external actions, like the sweating and the fighting, look exactly the same, doesn't the believer just end up crushed by the pressure of having to maintain this violent intensity?
The difference really lies in the fuel source.
The fuel source.
Yeah. If you are striving to earn salvation, your fuel is fear. You are constantly terrified that you haven't done enough, that the ledger isn't balanced.
Right. You're always checking your score.
Exactly. But if your striving is a response to grace, your fuel is love and gratitude.
That shifts the whole dynamic.
It does. The Apostle Paul captures this perfectly in Philippians when he says, "Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you."
So God is the one providing the power.
Yes. God provides the energy and the desire. The believer provides the exertion.
So it's the proof of life.
That's a great way to say it.
Because a corpse doesn't fight. Only something that has been made alive can exert force.
Precisely. Watson uses the analogy of an athlete and a soldier. A runner in a race doesn't jog casually while looking at the scenery,
Right. They aren't out for a Sunday stroll.
They strain every single muscle toward the finish line.
And the military analogy is particularly potent because, well, a soldier doesn't fight because he hates peace.
No, he fights to secure the kingdom.
Right. He knows an active enemy wants to destroy that peace.
Our spiritual life is military. Christ is the captain, the gospel is the banner, and our graces like faith, hope, and love are our spiritual artillery.
He also brings in this historical example of the Israelites in the Old Testament, which I thought was super helpful.
Oh, the promised land analogy.
Yeah. So God tells them the promised land is a free gift. It is already theirs.
Legally, it belongs to them.
Exactly. But when they arrive at the border of Canaan, they aren't just handed the keys to empty houses.
Right, they have to march in.
They have to face fortified cities and actual giants. They had to literally fight to possess the land that was freely given to them.
The land was a gift, but the possession of it required warfare.
It's such a perfect parallel.
It really is. The kingdom of heaven is given freely, but the journey there requires us to fight through the territories of our own sinful habits, the distractions of the world, and the opposition of the enemy.
So if you were sitting in traffic right now, wondering why your spiritual life feels stagnant, this is Watson pointing directly at you.
Yeah, he's calling you out.
It means rejecting passive Christianity. You can't just sit in the boat and expect the current to take you to the right destination. You have to grab the oars.
You have to row.
But if we are soldiers, we need to know where the front line is. And Watson says the very first target of this holy violence is yourself.
Yeah, the primary theater of war is internal.
Which is the hardest place to fight.
Absolutely. Watson breaks down this internal violence into two main actions: mortification and provocation.
Okay, let's start with mortification.
So, mortification is putting sinful habits and selfish desires to death. Now, when the Puritans talk about fighting the flesh, They aren't talking about the physical body.
Right, they're talking about the inward psychological pull toward selfishness.
Exactly. Pride, apathy, sin. It's that part of human nature that inherently resists God's rule.
Watson calls the flesh a bosom traitor.
A bosom traitor. That's so vivid.
It's the sabotage coming from inside the house. And he makes this chilling observation that the flesh doesn't attack us with obvious, terrifying evil.
Right, it doesn't look like a monster.
No, it attacks us by embracing us. He uses this analogy of the ivy and the oak tree.
That analogy is brilliant. So an oak tree covered in ivy looks lush and beautiful, right?
It looks super healthy.
The ivy is green, it's soft, it seems to be gently hugging the trunk. But it is silently sucking the life and the strength right out of the oak tree.
It kills by embracing.
Exactly.
And sinful desires present themselves as comforts. They present themselves as things we deserve, like stress relief.
Right. I had a hard day. I deserve this.
Exactly. But if we indulge them, if we let those vines wrap around us, they choke out our spiritual vitality. The pampering of the flesh is the quenching of the spirit.
So true.
So mortification is taking the shears and violently cutting those vines, even when it hurts to lose that comfort.
It takes real violence to cut that away.
It really does. But the second part of this internal battle is provocation. And honestly, this feels even more relevant today.
Provocation is so key.
Watson says we have to provoke ourselves to do good because the human heart has a natural tendency toward absolute apathy.
Spiritual momentum does not sustain itself.
Not at all.
Watson uses another brilliant analogy here, physics this time, the millstone.
Oh yeah, walk us through the millstone.
So a stone naturally falls downward to the center of the earth with zero effort. It just drops.
Gravity does all the work.
Right. But if you want to pull a massive, heavy millstone upward into the air, you have to use violent force because you are fighting gravity.
And the gravity of our fallen nature pulls us downward. We naturally drift toward scrolling endlessly on our phones, or toward prioritizing our own comfort above everything else.
It's the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And to pull our hearts upward to God requires intentional, violent force. It goes completely against our default setting.
Which is why Watson says we have to awaken ourselves. It's like having to act as your own spiritual alarm clock.
Because your soul just wants to keep hitting the snooze button.
Exactly. Waiting until you naturally feel like putting in intense spiritual effort is a fool's errand.
If you wait for the feeling, you're going to wait your entire life.
You have to provoke yourself. You have to violently shake off the spiritual sloth.
Let's talk about the friction of applying this today, though. Because modern culture is practically a laboratory designed to indulge our flesh.
Oh, 100%.
The entire algorithmic economy is built on convenience, eliminating friction, and providing endless passive entertainment.
They want you completely passive.
The whole system is designed to keep us sitting on the couch, consuming. So this 17th century call to self-denial and holy violence isn't just difficult, it is entirely countercultural.
Watson is diagnosing a human condition that modern technology has absolutely weaponized.
Weaponized is the right word.
The need for provocation is infinitely higher now than it was in 1669. The path of least resistance has been perfected by Silicon Valley.
So true. Okay, so waking up the soul is step one. But Watson doesn't just say wake up and leave us hanging. He provides a highly specific roadmap of everyday habits to keep the soul awake.
Right. He calls these the spiritual armory.
The spiritual armory. And the four main disciplines he highlights are reading the Word, meditation, prayer, and self-examination.
And engaging in these disciplines requires that exact same intense effort we've been talking about. Take reading the Bible, for instance.
Yep.
He uses two primary images. First, he calls it a soul-enriching treasury. You search it like a vein of silver.
You don't just casually glance at a silver mine.
No, you dig. You have to put your back into it. And second, he calls it a spiritual medicine cabinet.
Which implies we're sick.
Right. It contains antidotes for the poisons of sin and cordials to revive a fainting soul.
He also calls it a looking glass, like a mirror.
Yeah, that's a challenging one.
Because a gilded mirror might look beautiful hanging on the wall, but a true mirror shows you your actual blemishes so you can wash them away.
You don't read to learn trivia, you read to let the text interrogate you.
Which leads directly into his next point, meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And this feels like a largely lost art in modern Protestantism.
It really is. We often confuse it with Eastern meditation, which is generally about emptying the mind of all thought.
Just clearing your head.
Right. But Puritan meditation is the exact opposite. It is about actively filling the mind.
Taking a truth of God, turning it over and over, and aggressively applying it to your own life.
And his analogy here is fantastic. He says, wine poured in, a sieve runs out.
A sieve.
Yes. If you hear a great sermon or read a profound text, but you don't meditate on it, your mind is a sieve. The truth just pours right through.
Hearing without meditating is like putting food in your mouth but not digesting it. Meditation is the digestion.
It's how the nutrients actually enter your spiritual bloodstream.
That makes so much sense.
Watson argues that our affections are cold to heavenly things because we refuse to warm them at the fire of holy meditation.
But meditation is hard work.
It requires retiring from the crowd, locking yourself away from the world's noise, and seriously pondering. He totally acknowledges the difficulty.
Because we naturally shun it.
Right. We shun meditation because it forces us to be serious, and the enemy loves to keep the heart from being serious.
And doing this today requires violent effort. Putting the phone in another room, sitting in the quiet, and actually thinking.
It is agonizing for a brain hooked on dopamine.
Oh, it really is. Okay, let's move to the third discipline, prayer.
Watson says, prayer is the gun we fight heaven with.
I mean, that is an incredibly audacious metaphor for a 17th century minister to use.
It's aggressive.
Very. It implies aiming at a target and expecting a violent impact.
Well, he draws a very sharp distinction between merely saying a prayer and actual praying.
Okay, what's the difference?
Reciting words without the engagement of the heart is useless to him. He says a lifeless prayer is no more a prayer than a picture of a man is a real man.
Oh, wow.
He even mentions the story of someone teaching their parrot to say the Lord's Prayer. The bird speaks the words, but it isn't praying.
So when we just, mechanically rattle off a list of requests right before we fall asleep, we aren't offering violence to heaven. We're just mumbling.
Exactly. Watson says prayer requires pouring out the soul. It requires vehemency.
The violence in prayer is the wrestling of the affections.
He says a beggar, pinched with want, will be earnest in craving alms.
Because they're starving.
Right. If we truly realized our spiritual poverty, our prayers wouldn't be polite and sleepy. They would be desperate.
Which brings us to the fourth part of the armory. Self-examination.
This one is tricky.
It is. Watson uses a real estate analogy here. He says, if you were going to buy a piece of land, you wouldn't just take the seller's word for it.
You'd be crazy to do that.
Right. You would examine the deed. You would make sure the title is clear. So why do so many people assume their soul is eternally secure without ever checking the deed to their own heart?
You wouldn't drop your life savings on a house without an inspection, yet we gamble our eternal souls on a vague assumption that we are pretty good people.
It's terrifying when you put it like that.
Watson says we need to set up a court in our own conscience and bring ourselves to trial. We need to anatomize our hearts. And the reason this is so difficult is because of self-love.
Okay, I have a major concern here, though.
What's that?
If I constantly set up a court in my conscience and anatomize my heart, I'm just going to spiral into toxic self-loathing.
Yeah.
The guilt spiral.
Exactly. I mean, find all my flaws, obsess over them, and become completely paralyzed by guilt. How does a person examine themselves without just ending up hating themselves? That is the danger of morbid introspection, and the Puritans were actually acutely aware of it.
So what was their solution?
The guardrail they established was that self-examination must always be tethered to the gospel. For every one look you take at your sin, you take 10 looks at Christ.
10 looks at Christ for every one look at sin. I like that.
You aren't examining yourself to find your own righteousness. You are examining yourself to expose your need for his grace.
Because self-love flatters us and excuses our faults.
Right. And Watson warns that it's the sign of a spiritual harlot to always be abroad, spying on the faults of others, but never at home with their own heart.
Man, that is a devastating critique of the age of social media outrage.
Isn't it?
We're constantly abroad. We're always examining everyone else's sins on the internet, acting as judge and jury, and we never sit quietly at home and examine our own motives.
Because it is infinitely easier to critique the world than to mortify your own flesh.
Wow. But here's the thing. Even if you conquer your own alarm clock, wake up your soul and engage in these disciplines, you step out the front door into a culture actively trying to put you back to sleep.
The battle doesn't stop at your front door.
No. You aren't just fighting your own internal sluggishness. You are fighting external enemies.
Yeah.
And Watson identifies these as the world and Satan.
Let's start with the world. When Puritan theology refers to the world, they mean the cultural system that operates in rebellion against God.
The value system of a society that ignores eternity.
Exactly. And Watson makes an astute observation here. The world doesn't usually attack us with a frontal assault. It charms us.
It charms us.
He calls the world a flattering enemy and a silken halter.
A silken halter, so a noose made of silk.
Yes.
It feels soft, luxurious, and comfortable around your neck right up until the moment it hangs you.
That's the danger. The danger isn't in utilizing the things of the world like money, career, or relationships. The danger is in loving them.
Because when temporal things become ultimate things, they choke out our love for heavenly things.
Exactly.
But how does one practically navigate this? You can't just opt out of society. You still have to go to work and buy groceries.
Watson says we are to be like a living fish.
A living fish.
Right. A dead fish just floats down the stream. It goes wherever the current dictates. But a living fish swims against the stream.
Oh, I see.
To live in the world without being consumed by it requires the violent effort of swimming upstream against the cultural current.
Because if you just float in today's culture, you will end up prioritizing wealth, status, and physical pleasure above all else, because that is the exact direction the stream is flowing.
You'll just drift right into it. And Watson brings in a metaphor that perfectly captures this tragedy. The ring of clay versus the diamond.
Explain that one, because it's so convicting.
He argues our earthly lives, our physical bodies, our careers are like a ring made of clay.
Okay.
But the soul inside is a precious diamond.
And we spend our entire lives obsessively polishing the clay.
We do. We obsess over our diet, our wrinkles, our investment portfolios, our job titles.
We spend all our time and energy polishing a lump of dirt, and we completely ignore the eternal diamond that sits inside it.
We let the diamond get covered in grime while the clay shines.
We treat the temporary as eternal and the eternal as irrelevant.
And while the world distracts us with the clay ring, we have an active adversary trying to loosen our grip on the diamond.
Satan.
Right. And Satan rarely tempts us to commit a massive, scandalous sin right out of the gate. He tempts gradually.
He doesn't show up with an axe and chop down the tree all at once.
No, he digs around the roots slowly to loosen your faith. He steals into the heart by degrees.
He starts with a question, just as he did in Eden. Did God really say?
Exactly. He uses subtle compromises and small concessions to slowly weaken the root system of a believer's convictions.
Which is why we need faith. Faith is the intelligent grace that sees the hook hidden inside the bait of temptation.
That's perfectly said.
So let's recap where we are. We are fighting our own lazy hearts. We are swimming upstream against a culture trying to charm us to sleep with a silken halter.
Right.
And we are fighting an enemy digging at the roots of our faith. This takes immense, exhausting effort.
It's a war on three fronts.
So what is the motivation? What keeps a Christian fighting this hard when it would be so much easier to just, float down the river with everyone else?
The ultimate focus of all this holy violence is not mere self-improvement. It is heaven itself.
The destination.
Yes. Watson details the immunities and delights of the heavenly kingdom to give concrete reasons why the fight is actually worth it.
Okay, what kind of immunities?
First, heaven offers freedom from the red dragon, meaning there is no more temptation. The grueling battle we just described, it permanently ends.
Wow. The psychological relief of that alone is staggering. No more having to be on guard 24 hours a day.
Can you imagine? And second, freedom from all earthly troubles. Watson says there will be no more sighing.
No more sighing.
The lives we live now are interlined with troubles. Health fails, friends betray us, finances collapse. Heaven is the immunity from fragility.
That is deeply comforting.
And the third immunity he mentions is profoundly relevant for us today. Freedom from divisions.
Freedom from divisions. And Watson was writing during a time of intense religious and political division in England, right?
Oh, absolutely. People were literally killing each other over theological nuances. The English Civil War and its aftermath deeply scarred Watson's generation.
He was even imprisoned for his own views, wasn't he?
He was. So when he says that in heaven, Christians who couldn't agree on earth will be united in perfect harmony, it carries massive, massive weight.
He's speaking from a place of deep pain.
Right. He specifically names Martin Luther and John Calvin, two theological giants of the Reformation who had sharp, bitter disagreements.
And he says they get along in heaven.
Watson says, in heaven, Luther and Calvin are perfectly united.
Imagine a reality completely free of church splits, political anxiety, and relational strife. A place where perfect love casts out all misunderstanding.
It's a beautiful picture.
But how does focusing on that help someone right now? When the car won't start or the medical test comes back positive, or they just feel the heavy weight of living in a broken world.
Keeping the crown in your eye isn't escapism. It is the very thing that gives you the grit to endure.
Because people often mock the idea of focusing on heaven as being too heavenly minded to be of any earthly good.
Like it's a distraction.
Yeah, as if it's just a coping mechanism to avoid dealing with reality.
But it is the exact opposite. Seeing the prize provides the fuel for the battle.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, imagine wading through a dark, freezing swamp aimlessly, just trudging through the mud with nowhere to go.
Sounds miserable.
Now imagine wading through that exact same freezing swamp while clearly seeing a beautiful, lit-up, warm shore just 100 yards ahead.
Oh, wow.
The swamp is still hard, right? But the destination changes your ability to endure it. You know the pain has a limit.
And Watson has a line that is just pure poetry for this. He says, "The tree of blessing grows best when watered with the tears of affliction."
That's a stunning quote.
The struggle, the tears, the holy violence, they make the final rest that much sweeter. The contrast creates the joy.
Absolutely.
A person who has been marching through the desert appreciates a glass of cold water infinitely more than someone sitting in an air-conditioned room.
The thirst makes the water sweet.
But even hearing all this, our modern minds naturally generate a whole Rolodex of excuses as to why we can't live this way.
We love our excuses. And Watson anticipates the inner skeptic. He systematically strips away the excuses people make to avoid this holy violence.
Okay, let's run through them. Excuse number one. I have no power to do this. I'm spiritually dead. Grace has to do it all. So I'm just going to sit here and wait for God to zap me with holy violence.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding of how God's sovereignty interacts with human responsibility.
So
Watson acknowledges our dependence on the Spirit, obviously. He compares the Spirit to a violent wind that must fill our sails.
if there is no wind, the boat doesn't move.
Right. However, you must still hoist the sails. You cannot command the wind, but you can put the sails up. You have the power to put yourself in the way of grace, to open the text, to sit in quietness, to gather with other believers.
God's grace is the wind, but you must do the work of hoisting the sail.
Exactly.
You can't force a lightning strike, but you can go stand in a field holding a lightning rod.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, excuse number two.
Hmm.
If I live this strictly, constantly monitoring my heart and fighting the culture, I'll lose all my joy. I'll become a miserable, stuffy religious person.
Watson completely flips the definition of joy to answer this one.
What does he say?
He says, gall in the stomach.
Sweet at first, but then it makes you sick.
Right. Or he compares them to fire and straw, a quick, bright blaze that burns out in seconds, leaving only ashes.
Like getting a quick dopamine hit from a purchase or a social media notification, but an hour later you feel even more empty.
That's the fire and the straw. The holy violence, however, brings a joy that worldly people cannot comprehend.
Because it lasts.
He says, the tears of a saint have more true joy in them than all worldly delights. There is a deep, abiding satisfaction in a clean conscience and communion with God that makes the temporary thrills of the world look utterly cheap.
The miserable people are actually the ones trapped by their own appetites.
Precisely.
Okay, excuse number three, and this is perhaps the most prevalent today. I'm just too busy. I have a job, a mortgage, kids. I don't have time for holy violence.
Watson finds this excuse particularly absurd. He challenges the prioritization.
How does he challenge it?
He says, it is like a man who has been given a huge amount of precious timber to build a magnificent house, and he spends his whole life whittling the timber down into useless chips.
Ouch.
God gives us precious time to build for eternity, and we waste it on trivialities.
He brings up the story of Joshua from the Old Testament for this, right?
Yes. Joshua was the commander of a massive army, literally conquering a nation. Talk about a busy schedule.
The ultimate executive.
But Joshua was commanded to hold the sword in one hand and the book of the law in the other. He didn't let his earthly occupation excuse him from his spiritual duty.
Watson emphasizes that God never sealed warrants for idleness.
Right. He expects us to work diligently in our callings, but he demands that our diligence in our earthly calling does not swallow up our violence for the eternal kingdom.
Because when you stand before God, I had a lot of emails to answer, is not going to be a valid excuse for ignoring the state of your eternal soul.
It really isn't.
We can't blame a lack of power, we can't blame a fear of losing joy, and we can't blame our schedules. We're left with a very clear, urgent call to action.
The time for excuses is over.
The Christian life is not a hammock. It is a vibrant, active battlefield. It requires waking up our sluggish hearts, engaging deeply with the Word, and digesting it through meditation.
It requires swimming upstream against a culture that wants to lull us to sleep, and keeping our eyes locked on the eternal diamond of our soul rather than spending all our energy polishing the temporary ring of clay.
And as we've learned, grace is not opposed to effort. Grace is opposed to earning. The effort you put in is the evidence of the grace at work within you.
That's the core message right there.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought from Watson. It's a physical analogy about aging in zeal.
This is one of my favorite parts of the book.
Usually when we think about getting older, we think about slowing down, stepping back from the front lines and taking it easy.
Retirement.
Right. But Watson says a Christian should be like a falling stone.
And the physics of a falling stone are fascinating. The closer a stone gets to its center of gravity, the faster and more violently it moves.
It accelerates as it approaches its destination. Watson argues that as you get older and as you get closer to your eternal home, your passion, your love for Christ, and your holy violence shouldn't fade. You shouldn't be coasting into a spiritual retirement.
Your zeal should accelerate the closer you get to heaven.
So ponder the trajectory of your own life right now. Are you just floating down the river, letting the current take you? Or are you accelerating toward the center of your joy? We crave a life without friction, but maybe true peace isn't found by avoiding the battle. Maybe true peace is found when you finally step onto the battlefield, recognize the enemy, and realize that the kingdom of heaven is worth the fight.